A very good morning and welcome to the Ronald McDonald House Charities inaugural podcast. What a way to kickstart this morning with a meaningful conversation. And at the center of it all is us addressing mental health and mental wellness, which was pivotal in celebrating the past month of June. Over the years, I think we've seen mental wellness become quite a prominent and critical conversation that we're having that we want to spotlight. And not only it being a buzzword, but also for us to have, a lack of an understanding that we need to have around people's lived experiences, through their authenticity, various insight projected globally, but as well as the overarching approach that we all had now to mental wellness when we speak about life post-COVID. And at the very heart of RMHC's value proposition, and all those, living up to almost half a century of what RMHC has been practicing and has supported the families in a unique way as a source of strength and support as well. We really look at, how we support mothers, guardians, as well as parental care, for fathers who are also present, who are receiving medical care within the hospitals that we work with. Our unwavering commitment has positioned us in this chapter and various other ways to be quite a pivotal partnership to hospitals and healthcare centers, which has enabled us to provide essential services to hospitals as well as families. Mental health being at the very forefront, and one of the critical things that we look at as well is at the very heart of ensuring that parents themselves, mothers and guardians alike, also receive indirect and profound impact in well-being, as well as how we can take care of their needs while their children receive dedicated medical care. We are honored this morning to be joined by Dr Nokukhanya Khanyile-Lenake. I would love to say your name fully, so that is aware. A dedicated medical practitioner, a specialized pediatrician as well, a change maker, and obviously a mental health advocate. Whose love for children and community is very much at the heart of everything that she does, and is a driving force, I think, in part and parcel of, the expansion of your career. Dr. Khanyile, you have an understanding of mental health in a very profound aspect. And I think that really comes into the aspects of how you navigate physical health, how you regularly speak about mental health, mental wellness, actually, as well as, you look at organizations that are also dedicated to education and look at the destigmatization of mental health as well. But more so the promotion of mental health in youth and in society as a whole. You are a firm believer, of approaching mental health holistically, and not only from a linear aspect. I love the fact that you really look at the intrinsic nature of mental health as well. And you also look at how, you can partner with specialists as well. You can partner with various fields within financial aspects, within the image consulting aspect, but also to look at how you can achieve a biopsychosocial support structure in your approach to mental health as well. So I just really wanted to trick your brain and really unearth some of the things that, part of the lived realities, but also why mental health? Why did you specifically look at mental health? And I've said a mouthful in the introduction. I cannot go through this, the segment of chatting to you without you having to say your good morning, everybody, which is a highlight that every day when we look at you on social media.
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. I know was that. Thank you so much, Patty.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. I think very pivotal. And there's been such a stream of conversations that you've been saying, and all of these conversations that you've been saying through to Jew. And we've looked at that and we've, wanted to harness that conversation and bring it quite closely back to who the Ronald McDonald House Charities is, but also part of our value proposition again in who and how we support the mothers that we support whose children are receiving critical care within the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. But one thing that I'd like to ask you that probably people don't know is, what cure do you wish existed and why?
Oh, that's a very good one. So I wish the cure for just heartbreak existed, because I think so many people have gone through amazing life stories and then suddenly some heartbreak will happen and they never recover from. And I think it's so painful because with heartbreak comes so many other emotions. Could come a career change, could come a life change, could come the fear of rejection or the fear of rejection going forward.
True.
So, I mean, everyone always thinks it should be a medical condition, but I think heartbreak, because even with grief, you can recover from grief if you heal yourself, and that heart, that ache that you feel, helps you out. And I think we always talk about a cure, even though there's other things that you could do to kind of like deal with it. A cure means you take it away completely. And I think sometimes fear is good, but sometimes it can be crippling. And so I think heartache, yeah.
That's very, very true. And I like how you actually navigated between the thin line between grief, heartbreak, as well as just, people not being able to deal with how to process certain feelings as well. And I think for everybody who has gone through, certain aspects of grief, wants that cure, to say, I would like to get this thing off my chest, or I want the pain to go away. And that is one of the things that we have seen as part of our the Prioritising book here, and being aligned with the hospital and see mothers grieve the loss of their child.
Absolutely.
And you, as a parent as well, want to take that pain away, but it's a little bit difficult because you don't know how to navigate the aspects of that conversation. But I want to dive in a little bit deeper again to, the very core of our conversation around mental health. And I think using this as a thorough knowledge platform for people, but also, to navigate the stigmas that surround mental wellness as well. I want us to talk about why mental health is so important and what misconceptions have you come across more specifically as a medical professional, and why you feel it needs to be addressed.
So the reason that I feel mental health has become more popular, if you can call it that, or more spoken about these days, is because of awareness, which is a very good thing. But I think we're now getting to the dangerous tipping point where people are over pathologizing things and they're naming it something that it doesn't necessarily need to be. And so what's happening is people who could probably maintain their mental health just with everyday activities are now seeking professional help, spending a lot of money, spending a lot of time doing things that they don't necessarily need to do. But then the people who actually need the mental health are not getting it. And so what we find is because of this imbalance in healthcare access and also stigmas with healthcare use by people who need mental health services, we find that we're at a tricky tipping point now. So what I really feel, and I love that we're doing this and having this conversation, is because when you look at the families and the people who come to RMHC, when you look at the conditions that their children have, whether they're acute, which is short-term, or chronic or long-term illnesses, they're all dealing with some kind of trauma or some kind of problem that could potentially affect their mental health in the short or the long term. So this conversation is kind of to help people see what is something that is just affecting me in a way that I can deal with my family, find support, that I don't necessarily have to spend 1,500, 2,000 rand going to speak to a psychiatrist about, but also I think just to be able to see in your life and sometimes be grateful for what you do have, to say there are other people who may be alone in this journey, but at least, I have the people or the families in the RMHC house that I can talk to. I have some of the healthcare professionals who are able to explain to me what's going on. And that kind of helps us reduce some stresses on some of the moms and the families, but also society at large.
Yeah. I want to dive in a little bit on support when it comes to mental health. Isolation is a big thing.
Absolutely.
Isolation in the form of you feeling that you don't have support from a physical form, but also isolation in the aspect that you do have people around you, but you still do not know how to deal with less, and that's where people, I think, come and diagnose themselves and so forth and whatnot, which I don't want to dive into, the deeper aspects of why people take their lives and so forth when it comes to mental health. But isolation is a critical thing. What have been some of the things that you've seen isolation has an impact on, varying from mental health?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak predominantly in the context of families, and because I think as you said, mental health is a very broad topic, and I really want to focus on the family unit because it is actually the building block of society. Yeah. When you have a child who is in a family, they need a lot of support, but the people raising those children also need support. And so what we find is because of work pressures, because of financial pressures, and because of just gender-based violence and all of the societal ills that we had, we find people being pulled apart, right? Either by choice or because of circumstance. And so what we see is isolation becomes a symptom, but it also becomes a consequence of mental, physical, and social illness that we have. What we see when it comes to the family, and I'll look at just mothers and fathers separately, is if you look at the concept of perinatal depression or perinatal or postpartum depression, what it used to be called, we see that about 10 to 20% of mothers experience this. So that could be after the 3 to 6 months that a baby is born. But fathers, even though the data is not as prevalent, can have a data that shows 8 to 10% of fathers experience perinatal or peripartum depression. And so that can look like mood changes, that can look like irritability and isolating himself, more or increased substance use or abuse. And so we just think this man doesn't want to be a father.
Yeah.
Mom kicks him out the house, and now we've got 2 isolated parents who are now leaving this child with a lot more stress to deal with. We also look at anxiety disorders, and there's not a lot of data on fathers, but some estimates are that 5 to 10% of men who become parents experience anxiety around parenting. Whereas in women, it's elevated postpartum, and even during pregnancy, 15 to 20%. So that's 1 in 5. I mean, in this room, we already have 5 people who are females. So at least one of them has experienced something like that. And then if we look at there's so many other phases, hormonal influences, there's access to mental health services. I mean, we know that our society is very unequal. So you have about, according to some statistics, 15% of the South African population who can afford it is using the private sector. That is 85% using the government sector. That's a very big burden on a strained system. And so you get people who say, I just have to deal with it by myself. I have to put my head down and work. And I think that's where we find a lot of risk factors for mental illness, substance use and abuse, and like you said, isolation.
I mean, again, just unearthing the layer of that. I mean, there's obviously a socioeconomical deficit when it comes to the father detaching themselves mentally, and they still don't understand when a man goes through those symptoms, right? And it's got an adverse effect and a ripple effect,
Yes.
right? In the way that the severity of mental health from a male figure being absent in a home, and a maternal figure also being present in a home. But I want us also to look at, the socioeconomical deficit around how these conditions of mental health actually, really cripple a household more specifically, and how this has a huge compromise on a family. And I won't even talk about single-headed households.
Yes.
Yeah. But I just want us to dive into the aspects of those socioeconomical deficits that, the maternal parts and the paternal parts have, and how have we looked at it from a clinical aspect?
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult from a clinical aspect not to take into account how much single-headed, either maternal or paternal-headed households are, child-headed households are, because they're on the increase in South Africa. And you also look at grandparents-headed households. So this is where parents are either not in the household or they has died for whatever reason. And now grandparents who are ailing themselves are now having to take care of young children who are going through medical conditions, going through life, going through mental health challenges and social media challenges. So I think in South Africa, because if we look at statistics around substance use, South Africa as a whole is a very top producer or top consumer of substances, particularly alcohol. We also have gang-related issues, and those predominantly affect men. So what you find is that men are either too busy with those activities, and then they're unable to provide for the families, or even if they are, there's so many pressures that they have to deal with outside of trying to be good dads. We're also looking at moms who are there feeling like, I has to be here. I have to take care of my child, whatever the cost. And that means sometimes having to work away from home. Who's going to take care of their family at home? It sometimes means that they don't have enough money to provide what they need for their children. And it also sometimes means that they have to sacrifice their own needs and own desires and dreams because they used to raise their children. So we have a society that's been pulled apart by substances, violence, whether it's gender-based, violence, interpersonal violence between individuals, or even crime-related violence. You also then have people who are being incarcerated or in jail because of these things. Families being pulled apart, and you're having I would like to call it an epidemic or a pandemic of loneliness, where people don't feel like they can call upon one another and reach out to one another.
That's very key. And they see that.
On top of that, you see that, they always talk about Ramaphosa's economy.
Yeah.
The economic stresses that we go through, even for middle income households, is already difficult. And when you look at South Africa, with the population you have, majority is low income. And that's going to affect the ability to access health. And if I have to choose between a physical ailment or a mental ailment, I'm definitely going to choose the physical one every time.
Yeah. I mean, you've already given us such a thorough comparative analysis, when it comes to all other aspects that are trickling into mental health, right? And we obviously look at other people's lived realities. We look at the way that we weave in also the support that we have, at the RMHC, and how we can comfort the mothers and the parents and so on that come here. You've worked with the hospital direct, which is an indirect relationship that you've had with us also. How have you been able to support these mothers, coming from the bottom? They've just lost their child. What ways of support have you shown previously, as a pediatric specialist? And not diving into the tools as yet, because I do want us to unearth all of those tools for people who are watching us, and for them to really get a sense of how they can cope with the chronic disorder from an acute perspective, but also to a chronic perspective. But I just want your feel as Dr. Nokukhanya, from a passionate perspective. How have you been able to marry your support with the mothers or with the caregivers that come? And it could be grandparents, as you said, it could be a sister and a brother. How have you been able to marry that approach?
Yeah, so when I was working at the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital, which is where this branch of the Ronald McDonald House charity is, that was in 2019. I was a medical officer. And so I was still receiving a lot of my training in the clinical and technical aspects of being a doctor, working with young children. But it was a really an amazing environment because we knew the moms were right upstairs. So it was a different experience to what I'd had in other places where mothers were traveling, families were traveling from far. We had to communicate telephonically in the middle of the night if something happened. We had to wait for decisions to be made. We could make them until the family came. So it was really nice to be able to have access to the families that way, but also for them to have access to us. It was a lot more pressure because it did feel like they were always there. And it felt like at any moment something could be happening and the moms could walk.
And that's a difficult thing, right? I just want to stop you there. That's a difficult thing where, as a medical practitioner, you need to start your decision with an informed decision, yes, that you need to wait for the family. And you find that the child does not even have a thorough support structure, or even the mom or so forth. And that again, in itself, it's plaguing on your mental health, medical practitioner. So yeah, just, that experience of weaving all of that in and articulating, this is the decision that we need to make, but we can't at the very moment because we need to wait to make another informed decision.
Yeah, and I think just to say, because sometimes like one parent will make the decision to, if the child's from another province, to move and staying close by her. But what I enjoyed about this community was we sometimes had the family or the decision-making units here. And some people think of the nuclear family, mom and dad, but in South Africa, that's not the case. Sometimes it's ugogo, it's unkulu, or it's the elders at home. So at least we could have those people here staying with us. We could counsel the family together, which for me is such a relief, because I feel like some of the conditions, because of the nature and the technicality of the medical conditions that some of the children who are admitted here have, explaining that to a mom who's never been to Johannesburg has to now deal with very specialized language. Sometimes their first language or second language is not even English. And now you have to explain a heart condition, a brain condition to them. And then they have to go back and explain that to people at home who probably have a whole bunch of questions. That helped me relieve her stress, because they could be like, okay, I don't understand this. Or maybe it's because of a language breakdown. Can I have, someone else come in and talk to them as well? But I think stigma in our communities when it comes to illness in children is a big thing. So I used to see moms break down because someone thought that her child was sick because she bewitched them, or because they took muti or something happened. And to be able to give her family the relief to know that, for example, if you look at congenital heart disease, I can give her statistics. I can say, this is how common this medical condition is. It happens because of this reason. That's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not dad's fault. Sometimes it's just how things happen. That, for me, I think heals generational trauma.
Correct.
And so as a healthcare professional, knowing that I can provide that ease to the family also gives her confidence to know, okay, I'm not at fault. I can support my child here. Yes, it's very stressful. You're calling me every time there's a resuscitation, but I'm here. My child knows I'm here. And I think also one of the amazing things about having monitors attached to children is you can hear how their heart rates slow down when they hear their parents' voices. I'm actually getting goosebumps thinking about it. It's a beautiful experience, particularly with dads when newborns hear their dads, because we don't realize how close the family unit is because we just always see them so isolated and so separate from one another. So as a healthcare professional, that may be more cognizant and more deliberate and intentional with involving the family and making sure that we had a family-centered approach and further emphasizing a holistic approach to this child.
I love that. And I mean, you've already, dived into some of the support mechanisms, running through from various aspects of how the hospital does it, but also in tune with how you and your way of operation as a medical professional. And it's getting me excited because the second segment of our podcast is actually diving into those realities. We take for granted some of these support mechanisms that you as medical professionals, are aligning yourselves into. And then again, I want to speak about, your support with mental matters and how that has actually even shaped some of the ways that you show up. I mean, there's various aspects as a change maker, as a community mobilizer as well, if I can even call it. She is that way, I try to deviate so much away from the word influence because I don't see you as that. I see you as a person who's so embedded in community development, who is embedded in echoing, the messaging of mental health. And I want us to link what you've been doing with mental matters, more specifically, with how you're integrating your working ways moving forward. And I think it will be so critical for people to prioritize that as part of our monitoring as well, so we can also feed off those methods, and how we support the mothers here at RMHC. So I just want to share, a holistic picture around your integration and the work that you do with mental matters, and how that feeds into your everyday life of supporting, mental health.
So Mental Matters South Africa is an organization I started with my friend Gugu Masonde in 2018. As you said, we destigmatize mental illness, but more importantly, promote mental wellness through the conversation and provision of tools and resources that people can access. We recently had a parenting seminar in June 2025. We've been focused about just what it takes for you as a parent to maintain your mental health, and also why it's important from a developmental outcome, from learning outcomes for your child, and also for bonding and healing. Why it's important that as a parent, whether it's your biological child, an adopted child, a child that you are just caring for, why is it important to take care of them? I really appreciated the other two conversations we had, which were about infertility and grief. And why I like them is because we're able to bring healthcare professionals as well as people who live through the healthcare challenge we're talking about into the same conversation. Because what we like to do at Mental Matters, and this is what I appreciate and why this conversation aligns, is as a healthcare professional, I make plans and I think this is what we should do. But there is someone on the receiving end of that plan who has to go and effect it. And if they don't understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, whether it's medication, follow-ups, checkups, etc., they will tend to, either just ignore certain parts of it, or if they don't agree with it, just not do it. And then from the other side, as a healthcare worker, I need to understand, how does this plan affect your life? Because if I'm telling you to go to all these different appointments, do you have resources to attend them? Do you have a job that's going to allow you to go to these appointments? You have to take your child. So is there a special school that you need to take them to, etc.? So I need to be more aware of my plans to check in and say, this is what I'm thinking. Do you agree? It's a bi-directional conversation between two groups of people that eventually becomes one big dialogue that we have. And what I love about it is we've had people come just to say, this helped someone I knew. Because it's not necessarily that you're go through this, but you might know someone who's experiencing this challenge. You might hear about the danger signs and recognize that little small danger sign that no one else saw, but you're like, we heard this at Mental Man says, yeah, I need to help this, or I need to reach out. And I think the other important thing we do is we speak to people and give them the language to use when you're talking to someone that you're worried about. Because you don't want to just be like, Chobi, are you fine?
Yeah, Chobi's going to say, of course I'm fine.
It specifically directs in saying, I'm worried about this change in behavior. What's going on? Do you need help? And those are open-ended questions that force something to come out of their shell and help us heal the nation from wherever, if you're wondering.
Yeah. I want to stop there. There's just so many things that I want us to talk about, and particularly from a knowledge perspective, because you spoke about so many various layers as well that I want to bring into effect when we now speak to a mother who's lived through one of this. But I just want to wrap up, our segment right now to thank you, in tapping into so many various aspects of mental health and the work that you're currently doing. We will detail, some of the situations that we're talking about with a mother that joins us in our second segment, and also some of the free tools and exercises that would be quite pivotal, to change the narrative as well. But Dr. Khanyile, thank you so much for chatting to me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think in our second segment, I want us to unpack some of the various ways and the tools from a lived reality perspective. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Dick?
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.